Herzlich willkommen, meine Damen und Herren, hier aus Peking zu unserem Webinar zum Thema E-Commerce in China. Mein Name ist Michael Tanschitz, ich bin der stellvertretende Wirtschaftsdelegierte am Außenwirtschaftscenter Peking und es freut mich, dass heute über 150 österreichische Firmen bei unserem Webinar dabei sind. Bevor ich Ihnen unsere Sprecher vorstelle, möchte ich kurz auf ein paar organisatorische Details eingehen für das Webinar heute. Zum einen die Sprache. Wir werden die Präsentationen gemischt auf Deutsch und auf Englisch halten. Ich werde meinen Teil natürlich auf Deutsch halten, aber wir haben zwei Sprecher heute hier, die aus Peking, in Peking ansässig sind. Die werden auf Englisch vortragen. Wir freuen uns auf Ihre Fragen. Sie können während des ganzen Webinars über Fragen stellen in der Chatbox, die Sie hoffentlich sehen bei Ihrem Kontrollpanel. Wir werden diese Fragen sammeln und dann am Schluss darauf eingehen. Sollten wir nicht auf alle Fragen eingehen können, keine Sorge, wir werden uns dann per E-Mail bei Ihnen melden oder Sie können uns ein kurzes E-Mail schreiben und wir kommen dann auf Sie zurück. Zur Technik, wie Sie vielleicht wissen, die Internetverbindung in China ist nicht immer die beste. Es kann sein, dass das Bild vielleicht kurz ausfällt, dass das Video weg ist, dann sehen Sie nur noch die Präsentation. Sollte das Bild und der Ton ganz weg sein, bitten wir um ein bisschen Geduld. Meistens geht es nach 1 bis 2 Minuten dann wieder weiter. An dieser Stelle auch ein herzliches Dankeschön an die Firma Zimtfilm in Österreich, die uns heute technisch hier bei der Abwicklung unterstützt. Last but not least, wir werden dieses Webinar aufzeichnen. Das heißt, Sie haben die Chance, dieses nachher nochmal anzusehen auf YouTube. Wird das verfügbar sein. Wir werden auch die Präsentationen ausschicken. Und zurzeit, wir haben pünktlich um 10:30 Uhr begonnen und werden uns bemühen, auch pünktlich um 12 Uhr österreichische Zeit dann zu schließen. Aber lassen Sie mich jetzt Ihnen unsere Sprecher vorstellen. Zu meiner Rechten hier sitzt Mark Ray, er ist Managing Director von der Sovereign Group in China, eine Beratungsfirma, die sich auf das Thema E-Commerce spezialisiert hat und die schon in den vergangenen Jahren verschiedene ausländische Unternehmen erfolgreich hier auf den Markt, auf den E-Commerce-Markt in China begleitet hat. Welcome, Mark. We are very much looking forward to your presentation a little bit later today. Und dann zu meiner Linken Terence Tien von JD Worldwide. Er ist dort Senior Business Development Manager, JD.com, eine der größten E-Commerce-Plattformen in China. Und er wird später diese Plattform kurz vorstellen. Welcome, Terence. Und ich selbst habe mich schon vorgestellt, bin wie gesagt der stellvertretende Wirtschaftsdelegierte in Peking und werde Ihnen jetzt auch gleich zu Beginn einen kurzen Überblick über die E-Commerce-Branche und über den Konsumgütermarkt in China geben. Jetzt kurz sprechen über den chinesischen Konsumenten, ein kurzes Update zum Status Quo und über den Ausblick. Dann auf den chinesischen E-Commerce-Markt eingehen und dann auf die konkreten Möglichkeiten zur Marktbearbeitung via E-Commerce in China eingehen. Mark wird dann über die E-Commerce-Plattformen in China sprechen und die konkreten Erfolgsfaktoren aus seiner Sicht, die nötig sind, um hier mit Produkten erfolgreich zu sein. Und Terence wird dann die Plattform JD.com vorstellen. Wie gesagt, Fragen sind die ganze Zeit möglich. Wir sammeln diese und werden dann zum Schluss in den letzten 15 Minuten von 11:45 bis 12 auf diese Fragen eingehen. Gehen wir also gleich in medias res. Das beeindruckende Wirtschaftswachstum, das China in den letzten Jahren hingelegt hat und erlebt hat, hat sich natürlich auch auf die Bevölkerung ausgewirkt. Wir sehen höhere Einkommen. Tatsächlich haben sich in den letzten 5 Jahren hat sich das Pro-Kopf-Einkommen verdoppelt. Auf der anderen Seite hat die chinesische Bevölkerung auch mehr Freizeit. Es gab Reformen im Arbeitsrechtsgesetz, es gab Reformen bei den Urlaubsregelungen und das führt dazu, dass heute die Bevölkerung im Schnitt 115 Tage im Jahr frei hat. Das sind eben die Wochenenden, das sind chinesische Feiertage und das sind im Schnitt 15 bezahlte Urlaubstage. Das bedeutet, dass die Leute hier mehr Geld haben auf der einen Seite und auf der anderen Seite auch mehr Zeit haben, dieses Geld auszugeben. Und das wirkt sich direkt auf den Einzelhandel aus. Wir sehen nämlich hier steigende Einzelhandelsumsätze besonders im Konsumgüterbereich im Schnitt in den letzten Jahren bei ungefähr 12 bis 13% jährliche Steigerungen im Konsumgüterbereich Einzelhandelsumsätze. Wir sehen aber auch, dass es eine stärkere Nachfrage nach Premium-Produkten gibt. Das heißt, es wird nicht nur mehr gekauft, es wird auch bessere Qualität nachgefragt. Und was immer ganz wichtig zu beachten ist bei all diesen Zahlen und diesen Entwicklungen, ist, dass es große regionale Unterschiede gibt. Wir sehen hohe Nachfragen, hohe Einkommen in den urbanen Regionen, in den sogenannten First-Tier-Cities, Peking, Shanghai, Guangzhou und Shenzhen, und dann natürlich große Unterschiede, was Einkommen betrifft, in den ländlichen Regionen Chinas. Hier eine kurze Übersicht. Ich möchte jetzt nicht zu sehr detailliert darauf eingehen, auf eine sehr interessante Studie, die unlängst veröffentlicht wurde, wie sich denn die verfügbaren Einkommen pro Kopf in China wahrscheinlich entwickeln werden bis 2030. Wir sehen, dass ein großer Anteil weiter bei den niedrigeren, mittleren Einkommen angesiedelt sein wird. Aber ganz interessant, die Schicht der niedrigen Einkommen wird viel kleiner, dieser Anteil wird viel kleiner, von 37 auf 11%. Und dafür die höheren, mittleren Einkommen und die hohen Einkommen werden viel stärker steigen und dieser Anteil wird größer werden bis 2030. Was bedeutet das nun für das Thema E-Commerce? Ein ganz wichtiger Kanal, um Produkte zum chinesischen Konsumenten zu bringen, sind E-Commerce-Plattformen. Und dieser E-Commerce-Sektor, der wächst sehr rasant und sehr dynamisch in den letzten Jahren. Wir haben hier in den letzten Jahren ein Wachstum von 33% erlebt, Tendenz Wachstum anhaltend und ganz wichtig natürlich auch, man möchte Produkte online an Kunden verkaufen, ist wichtig, dass auch möglichst viele Personen in China im Internet Zugang zum Internet haben. Das ist die sogenannte Internetdurchdringungsrate. Und hier sehen wir, dass die einerseits noch relativ niedrig ist in China, bei ungefähr 50% liegt sie derzeit, im Vergleich zu den USA über 80%. Aber wir sehen hier eine starke Steigerung der Internetdurchdringung in China, was natürlich bedeutet, mehr Personen haben Zugang zum Internet und mehr Personen haben die Möglichkeit, online einzukaufen. Das führt mich auch schon zum nächsten Punkt. 60% aller Internetbenutzer kaufen online ein und besondere Bedeutung haben hier mobile Geräte, auch eine wesentlich größere Bedeutung als in Europa. Das heißt, dass viele Haushalte gar nicht mehr über einen Stand-PC, über einen Laptop verfügen, sondern oft nur noch über ein mobiles Gerät, ein Tablet oder ein Smartphone und hier ihre Käufe im Internet abwickeln. Dabei auch ganz wichtig, Leute wollen einkaufen, sie wollen bezahlen und hier hat sich in den letzten Jahren ganz spannend entwickelt, verschiedene mobile Zahlungssysteme in China. Abseits von Kreditkarten und abseits von Systemen, die wir vielleicht aus Europa kennen, gibt es hier Zahlungssysteme chinesischer Natur, Alipay ein Beispiel oder WeChat Payment ein anderes, die sehr viel genutzt werden. Wie sieht jetzt nun der typische Kunde aus, den ich auf E-Commerce-Plattformen oder beim Online-Shopping in China treffen kann? Dieser ist jung, gut ausgebildet und verfügt über eine hohe Kaufkraft. Jung bedeutet, dass er im Schnitt, dass der Großteil dieser Kunden 20 bis 39 Jahre alt ist. Gut ausgebildet bedeutet, dass er eine mittlere oder eine höhere Schulbildung hat und daher über eine höhere Kaufkraft verfügt. Dieser Kunde oder diese Kunden sind oft in städtischen Haushalten ansässig. Wie gesagt, immer mit Bedenken der Unterschied zwischen das Gefälle zwischen Stadt und Land in China, aber auch hier ist zu bedenken, die ländlichen Regionen Chinas holen stark auf. Was sind nun die Gründe dafür, dass ein Kunde Online-Produkte aus dem Ausland einkauft und was für Produkte sind das vor allem? Hier zeigen verschiedene Statistiken, dass hier besonders beliebt sind zum einen Kosmetikprodukte, zum anderen Lebensmittel, Gesundheitsprodukte, Mutter-Kind-Produkte, das ist eben das klassische Babymilchpulver oder die Babynahrung, von der man oft hört, und dann generell Produkte, deren eine hohe Qualität beigemessen wird. Ausländische Produkte in China haben immer noch den Ruf, dass sie eine höhere Qualität haben, in vielen Bereichen, dass sie eine höhere Qualität haben als das, was chinesische Produkte bieten. Das heißt, das ist auch das, wonach die Kunden suchen. Wieso kauft der Kunde online ein? Zum einen, weil er oft Produkte höherer Qualität zu einem vergleichsweise niedrigeren Preis bekommt, als wenn er tatsächlich in ein Geschäft geht. Zum anderen Bequemlichkeit. In den städtischen Regionen erwartet man sich, dass man zu Hause, dass man im Büro noch eine Bestellung tätigt oder am Heimweg und dass die Sachen dann möglichst zeitnah geliefert werden. Und für die ländlichen Regionen bedeutet das natürlich, dass ich Produkte in Regionen liefern kann, wo ansonsten gar keine Versorgung durch Shops, Shopping Malls und so weiter gegeben ist. Und ein ganz weiterer wichtiger Punkt sind die Informationen, die ich zu den Produkten erhalten kann, die ich im Internet über Bewertungen auf verschiedenen Plattformen leichter verfügbar habe, als wenn ich ins Geschäft gehe. Aber kommen wir nun zu einer wichtigen Frage, nämlich wie kann ich als österreichische Firma meine Produkte online in China verkaufen? Dazu gibt es verschiedene Möglichkeiten, die ich jetzt kurz vorstellen möchte. Die erste ist der sogenannte Direktverkauf. Das bedeutet, dass Sie mit Ihren Produkten, mit Ihrer Firma in Österreich eine Website oder einen Online-Shop betreiben und der chinesische Kunde direkt auf diesen Online-Shop in Österreich zugreift und ihre Produkte dann nach China liefern lässt. Das ist möglich. Früher war das nicht möglich. Das ist rechtlich möglich, Lieferungen. Es gibt hier gewisse Grenzen, die zu beachten sind, Wertgrenzen, wie viel denn so ein Produkt wert sein darf, das ich aus Österreich oder aus dem Ausland nach China schicke. Da gibt es Wertgrenzen pro Produkt, pro Bestellung. Das liegt in der Regel bei 2000 chinesischen Yuan bis zu 20.000 chinesischen Yuan, die pro Person gekauft werden dürfen pro Jahr. Aber hier ganz wichtig, es ist zwar rechtlich möglich, dieser Direktverkauf, es ist aber oft eine praktische Frage, ob es tatsächlich erfolgsversprechend ist. Denn ausländische Websites und Online-Shops sind oft in China nicht auffindbar, weil chinesische Suchmaschinen suchen nach Webseiten, die in China gehostet sind. Und Sie können eine Website oder man kann als ausländische Firma eine Website in China nur dann hosten, wenn man tatsächlich eine Niederlassung hier in China hat. Das heißt, Direktverkauf theoretisch möglich, praktisch wird der Weg zum Kunde hier erschwert, dadurch, dass die Produkte und die Firma nur schwer auffindbar sind. Eine zweite Möglichkeit, und darüber werden wir später noch mehr hören, ist der Verkauf über chinesische E-Commerce-Plattformen. Das bedeutet, die großen Player hier in China bei den E-Commerce-Plattformen sind nicht die Plattformen, die wir aus Europa oder aus den USA kennen, Amazon oder eBay, sondern der Markt ist hier stark in chinesischer Hand. Es gibt hier zum einen die Plattform Alibaba mit den Plattformen, die hier dazugehören, Tmall, Taobao, aber eben auch die Plattform JD.com zum Beispiel, von der wir heute später noch mehr hören werden. Hier gibt es prinzipiell zwei Modelle, wie Sie Ihre Produkte auf diese Plattformen bringen können, und Mark wird uns später dann noch mehr dazu erzählen. Das eine ist das sogenannte Buyout-Modell. Da geht es, das funktioniert so, dass eben die chinesische Plattform oder dieser chinesische Plattformanbieter die Produkte von Ihnen kauft, diese dann nach China importiert und in weiterer Folge werden dann die Produkte an den chinesischen Endabnehmer verkauft. Eine andere Möglichkeit ist die Eröffnung eines eigenen Shops Ihrer Firma, Ihrer Marke auf einer solchen Plattform. Aber wie gesagt, die Details dazu auf diese wird Mark später eingehen. Und eine dritte Möglichkeit ist der Verkauf Ihrer Produkte über einen eigenen chinesischen Online-Shop. Das heißt, Sie eröffnen in China eine Online-Plattform, wo Sie Ihre Produkte vertreiben. Hier ist aber zu beachten, und das habe ich vorher schon kurz angesprochen, dass es dazu notwendig ist, dass Sie hier vor Ort auch eine Niederlassung gründen, eine Firma gründen und einen tatsächlichen Offline-Shop in China öffnen. Und im Online-Shop dürfen dann wiederum nur die Produkte gehandelt werden, die Sie auch offline verkaufen. Wie gesagt, Das die drei Möglichkeiten. Zu all diesen Möglichkeiten gibt es aber gewisse Punkte, die zu beachten sind und die man im Hinterkopf behalten muss. Zum einen ist es, dass die E-Commerce-Branche in China noch eine sehr junge und neue ist, deshalb sehr dynamisch ist, aber auf der anderen Seite dadurch auch es zu vielen Änderungen kommt. Oft sind rechtliche Rahmenbedingungen lückenhaft, sie ändern sich oft und deshalb ist es hier wichtig, bevor man tatsächlich einen Markteintritt überlegt, dass man sich hier über die rechtlichen Rahmenbedingungen informiert. Zu all diesen Themen haben wir Informationen aufliegen. Das heißt, wenn Sie einen Markteintritt planen, kontaktieren Sie uns. Wir sind gerne für Sie da und versuchen, hier die Fragen auf Ihre Antworten zu finden. Eine zweite Sache ist, die immer wichtig ist mitzubedenken, sind Einfuhrbestimmungen und Einfuhrbeschränkungen. Nur weil ich mein österreichisches Produkt auf einer chinesischen Plattform gelistet habe, bedeutet das noch nicht, dass ich auch diese Produkte nach China einführen darf. Es gibt Bestimmungen zu Zoll, es gibt Einfuhrumsatzsteuer, die zu beachten sind, aber es gibt für viele Produkte auch Einfuhrbeschränkungen, zum Beispiel Lebensmittel, zum Beispiel Milch, Babymilchpulver, aber auch bei Kosmetikprodukten gibt es verschiedene Beschränkungen, die man bedenken muss, wo oft Lizenzierungen und Zulassungen notwendig sind, damit ich die Produkte hier in China verkaufen kann. Auch dazu haben wir Informationen, das heißt, wenn Sie hier Unterstützung benötigen, bitte melden Sie sich bei uns, wir helfen gerne weiter. Ein dritter Punkt ist, dass man natürlich, und das gilt immer im Handel, den Kunden identifizieren muss. Und dabei ist es wichtig mitzubedenken, was wir vorher angesprochen haben, wo sitzt der Kunde, wie ist der Kunde, den ich auf E-Commerce treffen kann, strukturiert, das heißt, was für eine Kaufkraft bringt er mit, welches Alter ist er und in welchen Regionen treffe ich diesen wahrscheinlich an. Und ein vierter, ganz wichtiger Punkt sind Kosten, die hier mit zu bedenken sind. Denn wenn ich meine Produkte hier nach China bringe, ist das oft mit Kosten verbunden, auch wenn ich es über E-Commerce mache. Das sind einerseits Kosten, die anfallen, wenn ich bei einer chinesischen Plattform gelistet bin. Hier werden oft relativ hohe Kautionen fällig. Hier werden aber auch Kommissionen fällig, die ich an die Plattform abtreten muss. Es sind aber auch Logistikkosten, die ich habe, wenn ich Produkte nach China schaffe. Und es können Kosten sein, die eben für Lizenzierung und für Zulassungen anfallen. Ja, das war es jetzt soweit von meiner Seite als erster Überblick über die E-Commerce-Landschaft, über den chinesischen Konsumenten und über die konkreten Möglichkeiten der Marktbearbeitung über E-Commerce. Ich freue mich auf Ihre Fragen nachher und ich würde jetzt das Wort an Mark Ray von der Sovereign Group weitergeben. Mark, the floor is yours.
Oh, thank you. Beautiful. Okay, thank you very much. So what I'm going to talk about is kind of succeeding in China's e-commerce market. And really what we focus on are three pillars for success, right? One is understanding the market. And so Mikhail just kind of discussed a little bit about the market size, operations. There are many, many different platforms that you need to understand. And it's important to basically just gain that knowledge, which is, again, part of what this webinar is about. So this is quite good for this aspect of it. There's also what we like to call brand activation, which I'll discuss throughout the presentation. And then finally, it's about gaining expertise, right? So before we begin, really what I want everybody to do is look at this photo. This is basically what the perception of China is. You hear these great stories about how big it is, how the opportunities are. You can spend a little bit of money and the money will just come rolling in. It's really perceived as a wonderland. It's strange, it's exotic. In reality though, quite frankly, it's a minefield, right? It's not easy and you really do need to be prepared because any small misstep can either set you back or completely destroy your opportunities within the market. So it's really important that you be careful and you educate yourselves up front. And we'll talk a little bit more about what you need to do to avoid some of these pitfalls. Okay, so Sovereign, just to give some background on us, we're a corporate services provider and we provide consulting services. We also work with a company called Kung Fu Data, which is an e-commerce, basically data and analytics firm. So some of the data that we have here is provided by them, and then we do the consulting and market entry support. So some key differences between China and the West. Right? So one of the really interesting things that we found is that about only 10% of the top retailers in China have brick and mortar stores. Right? So think about that. Only 10% of the top retailers actually have a physical location for the online. Whereas 90% of retail sales are on marketplace platforms as well. So this is actually about 93%. So when you're talking about Tmall, JD, VIP, this is where the majority of the retail sales are occurring online, relative to, say, the West, where if you wanted a Nike shoes, for example, you'd probably go to Nike.com. In China, they actually go to the marketplace platforms, and there are reasons for that, specifically looking at trust. But I'll talk about some of the reasons why a little bit later in the presentation. Now, Europe or the West, on the other hand, only 10% of the top retailers do not have a brick and mortar store. So these are the top online resellers. So very few of them don't have a brick and mortar store. Whereas again, a much lower percentage of sales are done online. Typically too, it's done through Amazon or maybe eBay. So it's just these two platforms mostly. So it's a really key difference. The whole dynamic is going to be different, and understanding this difference is really going to be critical in how you approach the market and why the discussion on the marketplace platforms is so important. So we have different types of models for marketplaces. One's a hypermarket, okay? And I can't ask you, because this is a webinar, who knows what a hypermarket is, so I'll have to just talk about it. As well as an online mall, and then you also have a bazaar. Okay, so a hypermarket is something similar to a Carrefour, which you may have. Do you have Carrefour in Austria? Yeah, so you may have Carrefour. If you've been to France, you've seen Carrefour. And it's a place in which you can go and buy anything you need, or Walmart, if you've heard of Walmart. You can buy your groceries, you can buy clothes, you can buy things for your cars, you can buy whatever you need at this hypermarket, right? Or you have an online mall. So I'm sure many of you have shopped at a mall before, right? So the mall isn't a place that sells anything. It's a place in which companies can set up a shop and then sell something, right? And then you have a bazaar, which is like a swap meets, or a place where just people meet, they rent a stall, and they haggle, right? So in China, when you're looking at the online aspects, you have hypermarkets, you have things like Amazon, you have JD, right? And online malls, Tmall is the most famous, or owned by Alibaba Group. And then you have Taobao. Like Taobao is a bazaar similar to eBay, right? So this is how you can kind of see these things. And so why is this important, right? Because they're not the same, right? And depending on your model, understanding which platform or platforms you want to be selling on is really going to make a difference, okay? So again, just looking at the practical comparisons, right? So a hypermarket, again, Carrefour, Walmart, they'll typically buy your products from you and then resell them, okay? There's typically a placement fee. You work with the platform to basically set up marketing. It's what we call a B2B2C model. So you as a business sell the product to another business who then sells it to a consumer, all right? Now, I'll talk a little bit more about JD or Tmall in a second, and we have somebody from JD to talk about that platform as well. But effectively, JD, either you can buy it, sell it to them directly where they then resell it, or you can also set up your own store on JD. We can talk about the pros and cons of that later. You have other ones like VIP as well, which is a buyout model, and a lot of the other different smaller platforms, okay? Then there's the mall. Right? So this is really something like, if you've ever been to Hong Kong, you have Times Square, you have Harbor City. This is basically a shop where, you know, it's a venue in which you set up a shop. right? So the mall really doesn't do anything to help you. You basically buy real estate, and the mall brings traffic in through their own events. And then from what happens is you sell the products. You operate your own store. Okay? So bazaar, again, garage sale, swap meets, individual shops, many products. This is kind of a C2C platform. Okay, looking at the differences, Tmall and JD are the two largest platforms. All right? So they have many, many categories. There's a transaction fee. There's usually a management fee and a deposit that you pay. The deposit is usually to cover returns, right? So they guarantee that you can, you're going to accept returns. This is a lot of what that deposit is for. They accept bank cards, Alipay, WeChat Pay. There's a lot of different online methods they take. And the key difference really is one is an online mall and one is more of a hypermarket, right? So Tmall isn't going to buy your products directly, except for, say, Tmall grocery, right? They'll buy your products directly. Sorry. All right. Got it? Okay. So whereas hypermarket, what they'll typically do is they'll buy your products and resell it. So you'll sell it to them at wholesale or some agreed upon price. You'd work through the terms of resell, and then they would resell it for you. They would manage the promotions, etc. Right? So if you have questions about this particular or the differences in the models, then go ahead and put those questions through. How does this go? Oh, except this froze. There we go. Okay, so there are also smaller niche platforms. So you have Amazon, you have Yes My Wine, you have VIP.com. Some of these platforms are going to be better for certain products. If you're looking at maybe fashion or cosmetics, maybe you'd want to look at VIP.com or May.com. If you're looking at more general merchandise or grocery, let's say milk or dairy, maybe something like Hypermarket or Yihaodian, which JD owns. You also have, for example, Tmall grocery. So there are a lot of different options that you can do. You don't have to just choose one platform, right? You don't have to be exclusive to one platform. You can choose a multi-platform approach, but it's still really important that you choose the correct platforms, right? And we'll get into this later as well, but some partners are not necessarily good at managing all the platforms, right? So we know one client, they have one partner for JD, they have one partner to help them manage Tmall, right? So you don't necessarily need one partner for all of these things. This is just an example of a snapshot of what the page for Yes My Wine. It's pretty simple. You have your product information, you have the price information. This is typically what the consumer sees. This is an example of VIP. Again, how they do the advertising, what the consumer sees. Typically as well in the store rankings, for example, at JD or Tmall, you'll see the sales, you'll see some of the customer feedbacks on the store. There's a lot of information. And one of the key things about China that I would say makes it very special from Europe is it's one of the most transparent marketplaces in the world. You can really see what everybody else is doing, especially within the Alibaba platforms. You don't necessarily need to see that on JD or VIP because the platform's really acting like your wholesaler. But it's something that's really, really unique about this market and just how transparent it is. So it's a little bit difficult sometimes for foreign brands just because they're not used to dealing in a market that's so transparent. So looking at ways that you can approach the market. And it doesn't necessarily have to be just one, but you have what we call a TP, which is originally meant Taobao partner, but really it's evolved into a third-party partner. And so them plus your own support team. So they can manage your stores, interface with the platforms, basically help you manage the stores within China or even Asia. You have a consignment model, which basically means that the platform or your distributor will hold the inventory, whereas you own it. And then as they sell it, they will then pay you the fee or take their fee and then pay you the commission. And then, of course, a buyout model, which is, we call it a buyout model, but it's effectively just a standard distribution model, where it is you're working with the distributor who buys the product from you at wholesale, and then they resell it. Right? So the concept is very similar. Now, the risk levels differ depending on the model you choose, right? And you don't have to choose just one model as well. You can run, for example, your own flagship store while also selling products to, say, let's say you have a flagship store on Tmall, which you use a TP to operate, and then maybe you also sell to JD directly, which is a buyout model, or to VIP directly, and then they resell it, and then so you can have multiple platforms. Right? So there are many different ways in which you can approach it. It's complicated. We really can't cover it all in 35 minutes, but certainly it's something that we can talk about in the Q&A or even in follow-up. Okay, so in summary, right, one of the reasons why there's such a massive amount of sales on these e-commerce platforms is that the traditional retail sector is underdeveloped. Right? So you don't have a really established brick and mortar retail sector. I'm based in Shanghai. Right now we're all in Beijing. These two cities are very developed, and you can basically go down the store and buy anything you want. Right? But if you go into central China, it's likely you're not going to find anything. Right? I've been to Hunan, which is in central China. I tried to buy milk. I had to drive 45 minutes to a Walmart, and I was lucky they even had it. Right? So it's very difficult to buy things sometimes. And imagine if you, for example, want Spiegel wine glasses, right? You're not going to get them outside of Shanghai or Beijing unless you buy them via e-commerce, right? So it's a very, this is a real key driver for the e-commerce sector. Another one is consumer readiness, right? So 10 years ago when I moved to China, you could barely use your ATM card anywhere that was not a Chinese ATM card. Now everybody has WeChat Pay. Everybody has Alipay, which is again similar to Apple Pay. The incomes here are extremely high relative to what they were, right? So the middle class, the average person here has a disposable income of about $20,000, $20,000 a year, which is disposable income of about $1,000 a month US. So they have money to spend, right? That's important. And again, the developed infrastructure. This one amazes me. I can buy something on JD or Tmall.com, and I'll have it at my doorstep either later that day or tomorrow, right? So I don't think anybody can say that about Europe or the US or developed markets. It's going to take a week, or if you pay an extra 20 euros, you're going to get it in 2 days, right? It's ridiculous. Here, the delivery infrastructure is really well established. And it's pretty amazing. And this aspect, by the way, in terms of the delivery time is going to be really important in terms of which model you use to approach, whether it be cross-border or domestic. And we'll talk about that a little bit later. So brand activation. This is kind of an interesting one. And I'm not sure if you've ever heard this in your basic economics classes, but supply does not create demand. Right? And so really we see two ways of activating a brand or to create demand for a brand. One of those is to spend money, right? Spending money, advertising, paying KOLs, key opinion leaders, branding companies, these types of things, right? You can pay money to do it, right? A second way of what we call activating your brand is by accident, believe it or not. Some key opinion leader, some famous person from China is traveling. They happen to try a product. They love it. They talk about it. Next thing you know, everybody in China wants it. And it just spirals out of control. It goes viral, right? And the Chinese consumers are very engaged on social media, right? So they talk a lot more than they do in the West. Immediately they'll be online talking about a review of a product, promoting a product, or talking poorly about a product. So it's really, if you have a consumer that comes there, that travels to, say, Austria, and identifies a product they like, talks about it. It's a great way to promote demand. Okay, and another way to think about this as well is if you look at this beer, it's beer. How many of you would buy it? Right? Would you buy this beer? Right? Okay, it's one of the world's largest selling beers. Right? Believe it or not, right? 100 million hectoliters are produced each year, except it's sold mostly in China, but it's famous here. Right? So you just think about it, just because it's famous in Austria or in Europe or US doesn't mean it's going to do well here. Okay, so again, not every company is Gap or Apple or Coca-Cola, right? So you need to think about how you can actually build the demand within China. Okay, so one way is just looking at the massive international shopping networks, right? So Chinese travel everywhere, but you have this thing called Yamato, right? So this is for people overseas. They want to buy something and they bring it back to China and they sell it. You have Xiaohongshu, which is basically kind of like the Uber for shopping in a way. So somebody's at a store, they see a product, they post it, other people want to buy it, and they can bring it back, right? So it's a community purchasing system, okay? One really thing to keep in mind is, again, Chinese consumers are sharp and they're well connected, and they are aware of the world's lowest global price, right? So different presentation, but when you think about your strategy for entering the market, you really have to be conscious of your global pricing strategy. Because as an example, I was speaking yesterday at an event, and we were talking about brand control, and one of the biggest challenges is gray imports or parallel imports. And by not having an aligned pricing strategy, this is really what's going to cause issues with that. Okay, so some examples. Kirkland Signature. I'm not sure if you've heard of this. It's Costco's private label. So it's a private label. It's not even really a brand per se. It's just the company's private label product. This was years ago before Costco set up their store. This is about a year and a half old, the data. But they had 14,000 daily searches for Kirkland products. Daily, 14,000, right? Burt's Bees, right? They had 15,000 daily searches. Now Burt's Bees has a shop set up, so they're able to capture that, but there was demand already there. Nulax, which is a laxative from Australia, again, 20,000 searches. So these companies, this is before they actually opened in China, they already had a strong demand base, right? And so a lot of the supply was met by people bringing it back from overseas and selling it on, say, a Taobao shop, right? And so recently, for example, we were talking to Burt's Bees, and they've set up a shop, and now they're starting to sell directly to consumers through cross-border e-commerce. Okay, so really, I would say what we want to do here is think about how can you activate your brand without spending a fortune, all right? Because this is important. And one of the things to think about is how many outbound tourists there are, right? So there were 117 million outbound tourists in 2015, right? And that number is higher now. It grows by about 10 or 15% per year, right? 104.5 billion US dollars is what they spend, right? These tourists, they go abroad, they spend money. At their average bag or basket of goods when they purchase overseas, I believe in France it was about 800 euros per person, whereas like an American, for example, spends maybe 200 euros per person, right? So they go there, they spend money, right? And they come back with a lot of goods typically. So it's important to think about, okay, so where do Chinese tourists, where do Chinese students, where do they live, where do they shop in Austria? Can you approach them this way? In a second, we'll talk about WeChat, right? But can you set up promotions in these particular shopping areas where a Chinese consumer can scan WeChat, get information, or be part of your network, right? So there's strategies you can develop about this. Okay, digital marketing is also a bit different in China. It's much bigger in China, but at the same time, it can be simpler, right? Biggest thing about China, what we've seen is really the mobile and social engagement, right? So WeChat, I just talked about the app. It's this super app which has virtually 100% penetration, right? I have it on my phone. Everybody involved in the webinar has it on their phone. We communicate, we share, we talk about products. If we don't like something, we immediately post it, how we dislike it. If we do like something, we talk about it. You have key opinion leaders that have thousands of followers on this app. And then you also have advertising that you could potentially do on the app as well. Right? And so I'll talk a little bit more about that when we get to partners. But just looking at WeChat, how powerful the app is, really, again, they have about 900 million users, which is virtually 100% in terms of it's about the same penetration as the mobile phone penetration. So it's quite a bit different. Everybody's on the app all the time. This is just a screenshot. You've got wallet, messaging, it's Tinder, it's your Alipay, it's everything into one app. After the webinar, we'll send you a link to an excellent video posted on YouTube by the New York Times. It'll give you some more information on the app as well. But this is just kind of another example of what the feeds look like, right? You have your wallet, you have your, it's kind of like a Facebook social media feed, and then also just, again, some advertisements as well. Okay, expertise. This one is relatively important, but there are a few ways to gain expertise. I've been in China 11 years. One thing I'll tell you is that if anybody says they're a China expert, they're lying to you. The market is too big, it's too specialized, and it's too niche for any one person to be a China expert. We can be experts in specific areas, but no one's just a China expert. So if somebody tells you that, be a little bit suspect. But there are a few ways to get it, to gain expertise, right? One is to learn it, okay? Again, I've been here 10 years. I'm starting to know what I'm doing. It takes a while to learn it, right? So you need to be cautious of this, right? But you can do it, and as you're here, as you come to the market, as you gain experience, you're going to learn naturally, right? You can hire people that have the expertise already, right? They already have the experience. They have the expertise. They can help you as well. So if you set up, for example, in China, you're likely going to be better off sending somebody to manage that company, or even if you're managing it from Austria, have somebody who's familiar with the market already. As an example, just an example, I was in a talk with Burt's Bees last week on Friday, and they're having a marketing crisis, primarily because they hired a Canadian who's never lived in China, based out of Hong Kong, to manage their marketing. Doesn't make any sense, right? They interviewed well. So be careful who you hire and just make sure that they actually have the China experience. All right, and of course you can outsource or partner, right? And so this is really hiring a TP or a branding agency or a company to basically help you with various aspects of what you need to do in the market. And again, likely there's no single partner. You would need multiple partners, or a company that would basically act as a hub to put you in touch with multiple partners. So when you approach the market, we really look at 3 stages. Okay, so one is an investigation stage, right? And this, I'm assuming, is where everybody is at. You're learning, you're understanding, right? This is really important in China. China is a front-loaded market. And really what we've seen, we've worked with 700 companies already. And of the companies we've worked with that have, say, failed, or even companies that I know of that have entered that fail, it's usually because they failed to do the proper investigation, right? They make assumptions. They think just because it's successful in Europe or their home market, it's going to work here. They come, they fail, right? Again, China's a minefield, right? One misstep, you're gone. All right, entry, right? So this is where you are either establishing a company, you are negotiating with partners. You don't have to necessarily, again, set up an entity in China. You could be working with a distributor, you can be working with a platform, or both. And then, that's basically getting your goods into China, right? Selling. And then, of course, growing, right? So, for example, let's say even if you bring this in the context of e-commerce, let's say you set up on a cross-border platform, sales are going really well, maybe at that point you would then want to set up inside China to then capture more of that revenue, right? So it's important to understand what stage you're in. Okay, so looking at the types of partners as well, right? So you have different, this is, by the way, a short list. Don't presume that this is everything, but you have companies that can help you with market intelligence, branding, logistics, operational support, search optimization. There's quite a few things. And just backing up as well, when you're thinking about, say, we talked about the platforms. You have Tmall, you've got JD. These platforms are kind of separate. They're not going to be affected by search engine optimization through Baidu or Google. They're completely separate platforms, right? So if you want your products to sell on these platforms, you need to optimize within the platforms, right? If you're on JD or a buyout, they're going to do that for you. If you're on Tmall, you really need somebody specialized, right? And again, a company who's really good online isn't going to be good offline, and vice versa. So we see things where companies who are your offline distributor may tell you, of course, they want to take your product and go online. More likely than not, they're not going to be very good at it, right? So you're likely going to want a company that can specialize in the online distribution or support. So in summary, right, what you need to do first is register your trademark, right? Regardless of if you've already registered your trademark in your home market, you must register it here, even if you don't plan on coming to China. It sounds weird, but it's important. And there's a few reasons why. One is, again, we're looking at, let's just take Burt's Bees. Their English name is Burt's Bees. They have that trademark, Burt's Bees. They own it. When you actually pull data on what customers look for when they're buying it, it's 美国小蜜蜂, which is American small bee, right? And they don't have that trademarked, right? So imagine now I'm an innovative Chinese person, or myself, and I want to go register the name under which Chinese actually search for their product, right? Now I own that trademark, and then I decide to make my own lip balm and sell it under that trade name. Technically, that's completely legal, right? Because I own the trademark. So even if you don't think that your products will be here next year or this year, maybe in 5 years it will be. And what's going to happen is somebody's going to travel to Austria or to Europe or wherever, see your product, like it, come back here and register your trademark. Because China is what they call a first to register, not first to use. It sounds really silly coming from a Western world where you have first use rights. If you can't prove that you've used it, you can't own the trademark. In China, if you've registered it, you own it, right? And there's a lot of examples where there have been issues with this. So just please be sure that you register your trademark. This is something we can help you with as well. Understand the market. This webinar is a great, I would say, first step into understanding the market. Typically, e-commerce, they're 3-day seminars, because it's so complicated, right? So this was a great, I would say, introduction to what the Chinese e-commerce market could be, but it's really, really far more complicated than just what's being spoken about today. Obviously, activating your brands, building demand for it effectively, you need to do that. You can find basically companies that will help you with this. We can help you find these companies if you need to. Acquire the necessary expertise, obviously, and of course, identify the appropriate strategy or models. All right. Just as some other resources from us, and we can send these out to you, one is a market entry handbook and an introduction to e-commerce, which is about a 60-page book on e-commerce. And so that's my email address and my WeChat. So I will go ahead and turn it over to the next speaker.
Yeah, thank you very much, Mark, for this very detailed presentation. Jetzt auch für Sie, meine Damen und Herren, der kurze Hinweis noch einmal. Sie können, wie gesagt, Fragen stellen. Wir freuen uns über Ihre Fragen, die Sie im Chat stellen können. Sie haben wahrscheinlich auch gesehen, dass die Kamera eine Zeit lang ausgefallen war, weil wir hier Internetverbindungsprobleme hatten. Wir versuchen jetzt wieder das Bild herzustellen. Und ich gebe jetzt gleich weiter an unseren nächsten Sprecher, Terence Tien from JD Worldwide. I'd like to hand over now to you. The floor is yours.
Hello, everybody. This is Terence Tien from JD.com. I have heard the name of this company like 50 times already. So you must have wondered what this company is all about. And I will walk you in our business in general for the next 15 minutes, roughly. You're welcome to ask any question in the webinar. And we'll see if we can answer to your question after this session, in the Q&A session, or during the follow-up. Thank you very much. Let's get started. Let's give you a little bit of background of the company. It's a fairly young company, actually. As an e-commerce company, started in its online business in 2013, so it's 13, 14 years old. And right now, we are already the largest online retailer in China, no matter it's online or offline. And we're on the pace to become the largest Chinese e-commerce player within the next 4 years. JD.com is, in general, the largest online e-commerce business here in China in terms of revenue, and we actually hit the Fortune Global 500 list in 2016, and we're the first and only e-commerce which is able to do that. In terms of business growth, it has been stunning from the first stage that we started our business online until right now, with an annual growth rate of over 150%, which is actually a unbelievable growth rate compared to regular European standard, actually. So, okay, I would give you guys some of the information about how we did that within only 13 to 14 years. Actually, at the bottom, I would like to share with you the first reason is zero tolerance of the counterfeit goods. Actually, in my presentation, some part of the topics have already been covered, and I will go over it from a different perspective and let you see how the business are going here in China in general. Counterfeit or IP rights is one of the most important things that you have to take care of before you move into this market. And what JD have been doing is that we take care about the quality of the product and guarantee the authenticity of the product from the first day that we do business. Basically, when you're living in foreign countries and think about coming to the Chinese market, the first thing you hear is that whatever you are doing good, and when you enter the market, are copied. So what we would suggest you to do is, as Mark said, was to protect your IP even before you come here. And there are some other ways that you can enter the market, for instance, cross-border business, which I will be introducing to later on. The IP rights is what you have to take care of in the first stage. And as the primary goal for what JD have been doing business is that we have to make sure that consumers can buy what's authentic, and that has been one of the single most important reason how we can became what we are so far. That's the first thing. And the second thing I would like to share with you is about the logistics. Mark has been covered about this. China's consumers, I would say, have been super spoiled by the logistics infrastructure here in China. When we're talking about whatever platform that you're buying from, either JD or any other e-commerce platforms, if you don't receive your package within 3 days, most probably the consumer here will call up on customer service and see what's going on with their package. And JD, as a e-commerce company, actually we have the most advanced and biggest setup for logistics infrastructure here in China, even better and more advanced than most of the specialized courier services. Our logistics covers around 98% of the entire country's population, actually. And there's this kind of service, as Mark said, that basically you can get the product within the same day or the next. We call it Double 11 project, which basically means that if you order something before 11 o'clock in the morning, you get it before 11 o'clock in the evening. And if you do it before 11 o'clock in the evening, you get it before 11 o'clock in the next morning. And out of the over 4 million packages that JD deliver per day, over 92% of them can be delivered within the same day or the next day. That's the second thing that we believe what helped us to reach where we are at the moment. And the third thing, which is about social media, this is something that what everybody talks about, no matter it's in China or in Europe or in the United States, social media can be considered as the single most important tool that you use when you go to the new market. And JD, here are some numbers I would like to share with you. According to our financial report in Q1 2017, JD has over 36 million active users. Actually, these are the consumers who actually bought from JD at least once during the last 1 year. And when we see about 200 million, that's a relatively big number compared to the population in European standards. But when we are comparing to the social media here, which is mentioned many times, WeChat, actually they have over 800 million active users. And the reason I would like to mention about this is that if you got the chance here walking into the Chinese street or in the metro station, you're going to see that everybody is checking their cell phone. And actually, most probably, they're checking their WeChat. On average, people open up their WeChat like 20, 30 times a day, and they spend about maybe an hour or even more talking, checking on moments, or talking to their friends about this, about the news happening around them. It's all in one app. And I want to mention about this because there is actually one channel within WeChat, which is called Shopping. And if you go to Shopping, you can see actually JD is writing there. So besides, you can use WeChat Pay, you can buy train tickets and flight tickets, hotels, you can pay, or even phone bill or any of the other bills that you have. You can also shop online, and where you shop, you go to JD. What I'd like to mention here is that actually WeChat, the parent company of WeChat, Tendenz, is actually the largest shareholder of JD.com group. So in a sense, actually, they have to make sure that we're successful. And this is the third reason why we believe that that helped us to where we are at the moment. Here, I would like to mention something that's been talked about for the new business model that you can go to China. It's called cross-border e-commerce business. A brief background about what cross-border e-commerce is. In general, when we're talking about online e-commerce, when a consumer is clicking buy, yes, I want to buy the product is actually, for cross-border, it's not yet here in China. It can be in Austria, it can be in the United States, it can be in Hong Kong. So basically, that gives the consumer the right to buy something that's never been here in China before. Or as Mark said, some Chinese consumers who are buying from the shelf from overseas countries. From a business perspective, this means that it's much lower risk compared to regular trading business where you have to keep a very big load of the product into a whole new country, described by Mark, the minefield where you don't know nothing about. So here is the business model I would like to explain to you a little bit about. The first thing is that actually JD.com is the website's, the company's e-commerce business in general. We call it JD.com, which is Chinese website, We have as the retail business model, which is basically we buy out and then resell to the consumers. Besides that, actually, on JD.com, there's also 120,000 marketplace sellers, third-party sellers, where they have their own store, and then they can sell directly to the consumers, and they can see all the data from their backend. On JD.HK, which is the department that I'm working for, is JD Worldwide, is a cross-border specialized marketplace where we have both the business models as well, for both retail, where we buy out, as well as the marketplace. And the difference here is that if you want to sell on JD.com, basically you need a whole setup here in China. You have to have a legal business entity in here. You have to have people physically here in China, the business license, everything here in China in order to do business with JD.com. But for JD Worldwide or cross-border business, because this business, when consumer buying the product, is not yet here in China, it can be considered as that the product, the whole transaction is not happening here in China. So basically, the big thing is that you can only use your Austrian business license to do business directly with the Chinese company and then sell directly to the final consumers. There's several reasons how this business has been so big during the last couple of years. The first one was about a baby scandal, actually, a baby infant formula scandal happened in 2008, where Chinese consumers had, I would say, trust issue with products and brands made here in China. So sometimes they just want exactly the same label, the same product that they can have, where consumers in foreign countries can have. So that's the first thing. It's I would say trust on kind of a perspective. And the second thing is about policy. This business has been booming up during the last couple of years, from a couple of $100 to a couple of $100 billion right now. So the China's central government has already set up several different cities to specialize in this business to clear all the packages flooded into the Chinese market, because these products are considered to be bought on a personal level. That's the second thing in terms of policy. And the third thing, which is mentioned here in the slide, is about tax. Normally, if you want to export to China, there are several taxes that you have to take care about. The first one is, of course, the import duty, which is paid at the customs. And the second one is, of course, the VAT, which is standard 17% here in China. And also the consumption tax for some of the high-end, for instance, luxury products or high-end cosmetics. But actually for the difference is that for cross-border business, the product is considered to be for personal use rather than business goods. So the thing is that there is a specialized tax specifically for the business for the products entering the Chinese market, and there is actually a 30% reduce on regular 17% VAT, as well as there is also a 30% reduced consumption tax if applicable. So basically, compared to regular export to China through regular trading business to cross-border business, we wouldn't say that it's the ultimate goal for you to go through cross-border business. But if you are a newcomer and this market and this business is completely new to you, you would like to test the market a little bit and see what's really going on here in the market, I would say cross-border business would be one of the most efficient way to do so. Normally, you have to set up a new business here in China, maybe take a couple of months or even 1 year for some of the items and categories. I would say, for instance, cosmetics and health supplement products may take several years in order to get the license. But if you want to do the business through cross-border channels, otherwise it takes 3 months to get everything set up, and your consumer can already receive the package and products all the way from Austria. So this is basically the difference. And I will stopping here. Please feel free to ask any question in the webinar, and let me know if anything that we can help you with. Thank you very much.
Yes, thank you very much, Terence, also for this brief introduction. And I think there were some very important points you covered in your presentation. An dieser Stelle, bevor wir jetzt zu den Fragen kommen, auch ein Hinweis von meiner Seite. Wir planen derzeit eine Kooperation als Außenwirtschaftscenter Peking gemeinsam mit JD.com, wo wir eben versuchen werden, für österreichische Firmen die Möglichkeiten zu schaffen, hier einen besseren Zugang auf diese Plattform zu bekommen. Das Ziel soll sein, mehr österreichische Produkte und mehr österreichische Firmen auf JD.com gelistet zu haben. Wir sind derzeit gerade dabei, die Details dazu auszuarbeiten und werden uns in den nächsten Wochen mit den Informationen dazu bei Ihnen melden. Aber kommen wir jetzt zu den Fragen. Es sind einige Fragen reingekommen. Wir werden diese jetzt an unsere Sprecher hier verteilen. Ich glaube, wir sind immer noch ohne Video, weil leider die Internetverbindung immer noch relativ schlecht ist, aber wir werden das auch so, glaube ich, gut über die Bühne bringen. One of the questions we received goes to JD.com, maybe as a first question. The question was whether you are also exporting your products from JD here in China to Europe, so basically orders from European consumers being taken on JD.com, and if yes, is this also for goods which have a higher value than just a very low value where you would have to make custom clearance for these products?
I mean, going the other way from China to Europe, right?
Exactly.
Well, thank you for the question. Actually, we're not doing it right now for the European market. Basically, most of our business are still conducted here in China. And our focus right now is still in China to bring international brands and products into the market. But actually, besides China, we also have some international expansion. For instance, right now there is a setup, something similar with JD.com here in China. We have the same setup in Indonesia as well. So I would say Europe, not at the moment, but internationalization and exporting to other countries, yes.
Yes, thank you very much, Terence. Another question, Mark, you covered this topic, the registration of trademarks, a very important topic here in China. One company is asking about the costs of such a trademark registration, and also a second question concerning the trademarks. Would this registration be the registration of the original foreign name, or is it the registration of the Chinese name for this trademark?
It's relatively inexpensive. It's about $2,000 for one class and up to 10 subclasses. So in China, unlike say a niche classification, they have subclasses as well. So it's about $2,000 for each class and subclass, and then each additional class you want to register in, which includes 10 subclasses, is also about $600. Right? So that's per trademark. And you really must register your English name. You would want to register your Chinese name, and you would want to register any name under which the Chinese may know you by as a colloquial term, right? Because if you don't, somebody else is going to do it, and they'll be trading under that name. And if you really think about it, it's maybe 10,000 euros, but it's going to really, you know, one of the big concerns everybody has in China is about the IP issues, right? All of the platforms, and this was discussed earlier as well, they really focus on IP, right? So to even sell on Tmall, to even sell on JD, you have to show that you own that trademark, right? Or you have authorization to trade that brand, right? And if you cannot show that, they will pull your products from the platform, right? And so it's one of the first steps for brand control. Let's say it's going to be anywhere from, if you think about the whole picture, you know, 2,000 for the initial trademark. Maybe if you have 5 different names you're registering, you know, up to $10,000, about 9,000 euros. But it's going to save you so much hassle in the future, and it's really worth it because this is another example of a trademark infringement. There was a Chinese company who registered a trademark for a California food and beverage brand. It's a mid-sized company. They don't have the money to fight for the trademark, and the Chinese company is actually trading under that trademark name here. They're producing, the California company is producing just say fruits and these food and beverage products. In China, they're manufacturing yogurt products. Okay, so the US company can't even come to China. Worse off, the US company wanted to manufacture or process products in China, but they can't even do that because they're not allowed to export from China without the trademark. So it's really critical, and I can't really stress that enough.
Thank you very much, Mark. Another question from an Austrian company to JD again. They are producing premium binoculars and telescopes, and they have a very high price range. So they range between 700 and 3,000 euros each. And now they are asking what's the average price range of products on JD.com, and if you would see any opportunities for them on your platform.
I would say the opportunity, yes, but I would give you a heads up actually here as the in terms of the policy for cross-border channels. This is not something that's allowed to sell through cross-border channels. Anything that's more than 2,000 RMB per deal, which means that basically anything less than 300 euro per deal each time, and also one individual is not allowed to buy anything more than 20,000 a year through cross-border channels, because that is considered to be for personal use, personal use only. So mainly small-sized items. But actually, if you're talking about the JD.com platform, our regular business and domestic business in general, there's definitely the opportunity. I would say, because JD.com, actually a little bit information background, JD.com started as a digital and home appliance seller. So basically we have a huge the male customer base, and that's number one. And number two is that consumers would like to spend money on our platform, and the average basket size is one of the top here, I would say, here in China. So I don't think pricing would be your major concern on JD.com's platform.
Just to address that question as well, one of the things that you would want to do first to really see if there is demand for this product is, again, it's a transparent market. You have access, like we could literally pull the data to see how much is being sold of your product category, what the average basket price is, what's being sold, who your major competitors are. So if you really are interested in saying, okay, how do we know if our 3,000 euro binoculars are going to be selling in China, you can pull the data to see who's buying it, how much they're buying for, what the keywords are. And depending on how serious you are about the market, you could within one very simple project, understand exactly what the demand is on multiple platforms.
Yes, thank you very much. At this point, we really have to cluster the questions a little bit, because we receive a lot of questions right now. We will try to cover as many of them as possible. However, again, for you, ladies and gentlemen, if there's anything we could not cover within this webinar, just send us a brief email and we try to get back to your questions. Another question, maybe, Mark, to you. Again, certification. There was the question whether EU certificated organic products can also be exported to China via e-commerce.
The certification, it would have to be certified organic. It would have to be certified in China to be sold domestically. Now, that being said, you could sell cross-border, and you actually bypass a lot of those requirements. The challenge to this, depending on the product category, right? So like dairy, for example, they recently, last year in March, they issued a new law with what they call a white list or a positive list. And if products are not on that positive list, they're not going to be able to be traded via cross-border platforms or cross-border logistics. So if you're selling an organic product, currently you can sell via cross-border platforms with that's EU organic certified. There may be some specific terms that you cannot use, which the platform would be able to help you sort. And then, but if you wanted to sell on, say, the domestic platform, you would need to get it certified in China. Now, things such as nutraceuticals, which need a very special certification, there's a reason why they're so big. They sell, most of their trade is via cross-border, because getting those certifications in China is so expensive and so cumbersome. So again, it depends on the product category specifically and the products.
And I'd like to add something here to tell you about how the cross-border e-commerce works here. Is that following up that the yes list or the white list, as long as your product can be sold through cross-border channels, you just need to register your product in the customs as well, in the customs before you sell it on the platform. So basically, the reason is that the product can be considered sold, let's say in Austria. We just need a certificate from the country of origin or any of the countries that's outside of China. And as Mark said, in terms of online presentation of the products and the wordings, they have to follow some of the Chinese advertisement or commercial laws. But in general, yes, there is a way to do so.
For JD.com, one of them is if you already have in Austria or Germany contact persons from JD.com which speak German, or where they can go directly to them, basically closer to the customer in Austria and Europe.
Okay. Number one, I would say the Austrian government, actually the embassy here, helped a lot. So you can always go to them, the first thing. And the second thing is that we, even though we don't have an office in Germany or Austria at the moment, we actually have a joint venture company located in Germany, which is called sich. It's a joint venture company between JD.com and the Otto Group in Germany. And they have offices in there, and part of their team are actually dedicated to help us to find European clients as well as brands from there. So we can definitely share the contact information with you later on after this webinar, so that you can contact them directly.
Wie gesagt, wir stehen als Außenwirtschaftscenter in Peking in engem Kontakt mit JD.com, und wenn es hier Fragen zu Ansprechpartnern gibt, können Sie sich auch gerne bei uns melden. Wir versuchen hier den Kontakt zu erleichtern. Then another question, maybe JD.com, before I come back to you, Mark. You were mentioning, there's one question where it's being asked, that you were mentioning that JD.HK is focusing on cross-border. Another question is for you, are you also focusing on cross-border e-commerce, you with your department, also on other topics?
So me personally, I'm from the cross-border channel, cross-border department. So for any of the cross-border inquiries or business, you're welcome to reach us. And for any of the other business that you want to go through JD.com or any of the other, let's say, categories, for instance, most of the business that we do at the moment are consumer goods. But if you have any other business or business sectors that you're interested in besides cross-border, or on JD.com channel, domestic channel, yes, you're welcome to contact us, and we'll refer you to the right people here.
So basically, the way e-commerce markets work right now, the cross-border e-commerce, the ideal way, again, I was mentioning earlier about the lag time between order and delivery. It should really be about a day, right? So what happens is in the free trade zone, what you would do is you would ship in bulk. It would be stored in a free trade zone, which is outside of the customs border. So the biggest one's actually Hangzhou right now. And so the goods are stored there in a 3PL, third-party logistics provider warehouse. And then as the orders come through on the platform, they're fulfilled individually. So they're shipped, you buy a cup, right? They're shipped in bulk by pallet to Hangzhou. And then I want to buy the cup online. This individual cup is then shipped from the warehouse across the customs border to the purchaser. Now that being said, again, you have this law that was passed last year. It hasn't been implemented fully, which has this positive list or the white list. It's up for review this January, so it may or may not come into effect. But if the product is not on that list, then it won't be allowed to come through into China via the free trade zones. Now, that being said, you could still ship it from, say, Austria or a different country, but then you're looking at other challenges. For example, you know, nobody wants to wait 2 weeks for a product. So really, if you're looking at something, if it's not in a restricted category, such as nutraceuticals or, let's say, organic, or if you have to have the organic label, if it's something that you could ship in bulk inside of China, if you can get the necessary licenses to do that, whether they need CIQ, certification of your factory, whatever, depending on your product. If cross-border shuts you down in January or later, you can always look into something like a buyout model where a distributor pulls your products in line, or set up a company depending on the demands. It's a bit complicated.
We stay with you, Mark. Another company is saying and stating very correctly, I think, that a lot of European businesses currently look at the Chinese market, but they're also concerned about the risk. And now they are asking, what risks do you see when it comes to e-commerce, and how could you avoid those risks?
I've got 10 minutes. No. Oh, Jesus. So really quickly, the biggest risk well, there are a few risks. Okay. So the first, but let's take it into one. It's brand control, right? That's your biggest risk. And what we've seen is you have to look at a global strategy, right? Because if there's demand here, if it's selling, if you don't have control of the brands, then you are going to be losing a lot of margin. And in China, the great thing about China, or perhaps the horrible thing about China, is that brands will compete with themselves, right? So you think, okay, I'm Rydell. How am I competing with myself? It's like Nike, for example. On Nike, on Tmall, there are about 40,000, Tmall, Taobao, there are 40,000 stores selling Nike products. 40,000 stores selling Nike products. There's one authorized store selling Nike products. That's the Nike store, okay? So they're competing with themselves. Now, that being said, well, how can that be possible? So if you have a distributor that you've licensed, or a franchisee that's licensed, and they decide to set up a Tmall store, you're now competing with them, right? So this is a risk, right? If your pricing strategy is not aligned, so for example, if there's price arbitrage, if I can buy it in Austria for half the price that I can buy it for in China, I am going to be very good. I'm going to fly over to Austria. I'm going to buy 5 suitcases, pay the $100 to put it on the plane, bring it back, and resell it, right? And so you're going to run into these types of things. So the biggest risk, again, brand control. And there's a complicated strategy to do it. It can take, if you've lost brand control, it can take 6 months to a year to regain it. But really, it's honestly, there's a 2-hour presentation I give on that. So point is it's complicated, but that's it. You need to look at how you control your brand. That's the biggest risk.
Also in your presentation right now, Taobao. So there's the question now, if it's correct that currently brand stores on Tmall are only being established upon invitation by Tmall.
So not entirely true, but it's not necessarily easy to set up your own store on Tmall. They are very selective in terms of the brands that they take. So that, yeah, that's true. They are selective. But so in that sense, let's say you want to set up your own branded flagship. An alternative would be to, say, identify, again, we didn't talk too much about the TPs or the types of TPs. That's another 1-hour presentation. You know, if you can identify a TP who is willing to take your brand on as either consignment or buyout, or just be as your TP, there's only a couple hundred TPs. And if they have a good relationship with the Xiao'er, which is basically the brand's category manager, they can sometimes get your product listed, or you can even come on to the TP may have their own multi-brand store. Maybe they can actually launch the store for you on your behalf. Again, it depends on your brand. It depends on what they're going to take. One thing about, I would say one thing about all of the platforms here is they really support winners. They're not going to take a brand on that they don't think is going to sell. They make money on volume and transactions. So if your product doesn't sell anything, they really are, you're not going to get a lot of attention. So they really back winners. So if your brand or your product is something that will sell really well, you're going to get the support.
The question on how successful you think or how much it would make sense to also sell tourism products via JD.com, whether this is possible. For example, travels or journeys to Europe for cultural or leisure reasons. And the second question is how much potential do you see for the sale of beverages on JD.com?
Travel products, right? Let's put that in two. The first thing is, let's say, regarding the virtual products, for instance, services regarding traveling business. Besides selling physical products on JD.com, there's also a section selling like train tickets, flight tickets, hotels, even for overseas, even visa, this kind of service on JD.com. So definitely, yes, there is an opportunity that you can do that. For some of the travel physical products like souvenirs, this kind of stuff, and normally have to go through a really niche market where consumers are really interested in the product. And the second thing is that I think the target market for this type of product is very specific to the consumers who are willing to go there or are very interested. And the second thing is that some of them may even have been there and they want something as a souvenir to bring back, but they don't want to take something to carry up their suitcase. So I think that would be the market regarding this. And the second thing regarding the beverage, this goes to actually part of the question has been answered by Mark a little bit earlier regarding the logistics. Beverage, or actually in general, supermarket FMCG business is one of the most popular category here on the platform. But beverage is kind of difficult because it's heavy. So it basically doesn't make any sense to ship just case by case or bottle by bottle all the way from Austria to China. So we would suggest the best way to do that is to keep them in bulk in the bonded warehouse, so to lower the cost but still lower the risk as well at the same time, to do business directly with the Chinese consumer.
About the services for tourism, just as an example for services, the Pizza Hut, they have a store on Tmall, right? So you can buy coupons upfront on Tmall to buy pizzas and then redeem them. So services are actually starting to pick up. It's not just physical products anymore.
Thank you very much to the both of you. Bevor ich jetzt endgültig schließe, nochmal drei Hinweise. Sie haben gesehen, E-Commerce ist ein sehr breites Thema. Es ist gar nicht möglich, das alles in einem 1,5-stündigen Webinar zu behandeln. Deshalb auch der Hinweis, unser Büro setzt einen Schwerpunkt auf die wachsende Konsumgüter- und Lifestyle-Branche in China. Wir haben dazu auch einen Branchenreport Konsumgüter und Lifestyle aufgelegt, den wir an Sie versenden werden, gemeinsam mit den Präsentationen, die Sie heute gesehen haben. Und genauso auch nochmal der Hinweis, das ganze Webinar wird nachher auf YouTube verfügbar sein in ungefähr einer Woche. Ich weiß, wir hatten einige Verbindungsprobleme. Wenn Sie nicht alles mitbekommen haben, können Sie sich das Webinar nochmal anschauen. Ein Punkt noch, auf den ich hinweisen möchte, die Kooperation mit JD.com, die ich vorher schon kurz angesprochen habe. Wie gesagt, arbeiten wir gerade daran, eine Möglichkeit zu finden, mehr österreichische Produkte hier und mehr österreichischen Firmen hier den Zugang zu JD.com zu ermöglichen auf diese Plattform. Wir werden uns in den nächsten Wochen hier mit den Informationen bei Ihnen melden. Es wurden leider nicht alle Fragen beantwortet. Wenn noch etwas offen ist, schreiben Sie uns einfach ein kurzes E-Mail. Wir werden uns auch koordinieren hier mit unseren beiden Sprechern. Und jetzt ist es zuerst einmal an mir, Danke zu sagen an unsere beiden Sprecher. Thank you very much to the both of you for being with us here today and sharing so much information in such a short time. Und auch an Sie vielen herzlichen Dank, meine Damen und Herren, fürs Dabeisein und bis zum nächsten Mal. Auf Wiedersehen aus Peking.